is the Nutrimedical Report. This is Tim Alexander, the Earl Sterling, co-hosting today while Dr. Bill's out having dental work. My co-host for the first half hour is Jeff DeVillay. Jeff, are you there?
I'm here.
Alrighty. Jeff's been on this show several times before. He's a political commentator. He's a recording engineer as well as performing artist. And let's get right to it, Jeff. Anything you want to start with, or do you want me to?
Well, I've been reading these stories over the past week, particularly about a new mass extinction. And some of them say it's 100 times faster than the normal rate since the time of the dinosaurs. Some say it's up to 114 times faster. But what we do know is that animals and classes of animals are disappearing at a more rapid rate than they have in millions of years.
Yeah, there's lots of different reasons, I'm sure, for that. But, you know, animals are prone to some of the stuff that's killing us. And I think we have multiple Illuminati, globalist, soft kill agendas going. For instance, when we drink tap water, we're in almost all of the United States consuming fluoride, which is a waste product from the aluminum industry. It's poisonous. It really doesn't prevent dental problems. Although I hear it will keep your skeleton pretty safe after it kills you. It's definitely dumbing people down. Sure, yeah. IQ points went down several points after its introduction. We've got Roundup everywhere, including the natural waterways, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it's making a few people very rich at the expense of 99.99% of the people.
Well, and isn't that the norm for America today? We grew up a couple blocks from one another in the American Midwest, upper middle class neighborhood, very safe in Evansville, Indiana, which is about out of the way, very safe city. And I swear I never would have thought America would get this bad.
Well, it has, and I think in some ways it's worse than you think. Yeah.
I'm afraid you're right. It's just it gets a little bit crazier all the time.
Well, fluoride, there's a parallel with the fluoride. Let me give you an example. We put chemicals, and I'm trying to think of the name of it now, but there's a chemical that they add to salad bars and to wines that keeps the wine from fermenting any further than it is in order to keep the sulfites. That's what
sulfites. That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
And so they put these sulfites in the wine by federal law in the United States. And my whole life, I'd like to sip a little wine now and then, and after I'd drink a couple of glasses of wine, I'd get a headache. And I thought, what is this? And it went on for years and years. Well, then when I started to travel to other countries in Europe and Latin America, their wines are not required to have those chemicals. And, not that I'm advocating it, but I could drink 8 glasses of wine in those countries and not get a headache. And the only difference I could determine was that ours was full of sulfite and theirs didn't have any. And this
I drank most of a couple bottles of champagne one night, and I guarantee you I had a headache.
Oh, pounder.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And look at the whole cigarette industry. There were several hundred different ingredients that were added to cigarette tobacco, and by federal law, that information had to remain secret, and it was a felony if you disclosed it. Now, what kind of craziness is that?
That's like the TPP.
Hey, I was just thinking that. They're passing this law, which is probably going to
Nobody knows anything about anything, but it's great for us.
Yeah, and they give fast-track authority, and yet the American public does not know what's in this treaty. We have no idea, other than we're broadly told most of it doesn't concern trade. There are very serious fears being expressed that it will dramatically reduce Medicare as our generation, is the bell curve of the growing population. The post-World War II baby boomers are now retiring, and so they're going to gut that.
The ones that have survived all the wars for profit are retiring.
Yeah, exactly. And wars for profit is that other true. By the way, the Pentagon on my blog, Europe, and folks, if you want to go to my blog, just do a Google search, large sterling Europe, and you'll find it. The Pentagon is considering deploying nuclear missiles to Europe directed against Russian cities as a first strike weapon. Now, I mean, how crazy can you be? Russia has thousands and thousands of hydrogen bombs aimed at America. They don't want to. They don't want to be our enemy, but they are determined to protect themselves.
Well,
and we keep every day. There's something we're doing to provoke them.
Well, it's not a profitable proposition to advocate for peace. If you advocate for the sale of chemicals and weapons and so on around the world in the 150-plus wars and things we're involved in, it's a high-profit center. And
well, I won't mention the company or the individual's name, but there's a person that lives in Evansville who is very big in the defense industry, and he has a Gulfstream jet and a $10 million house, and he has a whole fleet of Bentleys and Ferraris and so forth, and he's done quite well, and of course he hosts. He works the Republican side of the aisle mostly, and he hosts. Dick Cheney's been here several times. His big mansion, et cetera, et cetera. How about the poor guys that come home minus a couple legs?
Right. It helped to make him richer, so that doesn't matter.
Exactly, because if you're sociopathic or psychopathic, you don't care. But I happen to think that we should care about our boys that we send to war. I happen to think that we should engage in war unless there's a definite threat to this country. And I don't think all this money we're spending in supporting the ISIS, which we set up along with the Israeli intelligence, and they're killing Christians because they're Christians, they're chopping off heads, they're doing all kind of unspeakable acts. It's American tax dollars that's supporting this.
Right.
So Israel can become greater Israel. And I think that's demonic. I think it's sickening. It's disgusting. It's anti-American.
Well, in the Mideast, and particularly Israel, is like one of those fake walls you see in the Western movie towns, the town movie sets, where it's just the front wall and nothing else. It's a big display. It's a big bunch of noise and a big bunch of visuals, but in the end, it's just a little puppet with, squeaking by.
And, I don't begrudge the Israeli people surviving and having a good life. Heck, my roommate in college, his dad was the U.S. military attaché in Israel, and what became his father-in-law was one of the top diplomats there. He met his wife in Israel.
No problem with the people of the country at all. I have a problem with the aggression done in the name of the United States. And, here I see a note here, Chris Christie preps for plunging into the presidential pool. I guess there's no water in there.
Well, on deck, look out.
It's a dry pool. But anyway,
well, there's so many Republicans running. Well, I think what they're going to do is ensure Jeb Bush his nomination. Bernie Sanders, has actually is now polling has taken lead over Hillary. I think Hillary is demonic. I like some of the stuff Bernie Sanders does. He's a bit too liberal in some areas for me. The problem with Bernie is he's part of the tribe, and I don't know if I can totally trust him, but I think he's basically a pretty good man.
Well, he polled 45% this week. 45% approved. If he were to run as a socialist, 45% said that's fine.
Yeah, well, I'm not a socialist, but what we're seeing in America is
point being is people are so desperate
fascism.
They want to get around it anyway.
We'll be back in just a couple minutes, folks. This is Tim Alexander and Jeff DeVillay, Nutrimedical Report Show, with Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling, and Jeff DeVillay. Okay, we're back, Jeff. We were talking during break, and last Tuesday on the air I was talking with Dr. Deagle about this. The cost of health care, and in particular the hospitalization, is just nuts. I think America is number one in healthcare cost, and we're like 17th or way down the list in terms of quality of care.
Oh, I think we're 24th.
24th. That figures. I'm surprised it's that high, to be honest.
Of outcomes. Yeah. Now, we are first by a
lot of outcomes as you go out the door at room temperature.
Yeah. Exactly. And but there's a little factory, I say little, it's a pretty good sized factory near where I live called Hexcelanese from Europe. It's a Swiss, I think, company. And they make railroad train cars full of powdered chemical that's in Tylenol. And these rail cars are going out by the train load all the time. You can see them. And they're leaving with, probably 40,000 pounds of this powder in each rail car. And then it goes off to McNeil and all these places so they can make Tylenol pills and whatever else, all these other companies that make pills out of it. And, I'm taking a guess, but I've known people that have worked there, and I'll bet you that there's enough powder for 100 pills and a penny's worth of that powder.
So, in other words, a pill, the manufacturer gets the actual cost is maybe 1/100 of a cent, right?
Yeah, 0.01 cents.
Now, the average, the answer to this. We've talked about this before, but the statistical average nationwide for a Tylenol or administered in hospital. I'm not talking about Tylenol, codeine, nothing exotic, just a run-of-the-mill Tylenol. And I'm not talking about, suppository type drug. I'm talking about just a run-of-the-mill Tylenol. $49 is the statistical average. $49. Administered in a hospital for one Tylenol.
Well, so they get for one Tylenol what 5,000 Tylenols cost. Not bad, huh?
Nice little markup. I had a little dispute with one of the local hospitals here. I had kind of an asthma attack, and they did a CAT scan, and the insurance ended up refusing to pay for it, and it was $2,000. And
they bat it back and forth, and then finally it's your fault.
Yeah, it's always my fault, never their fault. But $2,000. Now, your wife, you guys live in Carpus. You want to cross the bridge to your doctor. Marina had to have a CAT scan.
CT scan.
Tell us what the cost was.
Well, what was interesting to me about that was they used Kodak equipment made in USA. They used Kodak film. Everything was from here, so they had to pay a premium for it. And the scan, including copies of the film to take with us, was $20.
And mine was $2,000, just over $2,000 actually.
Right, but yours was $2,000 because they paid a lot less because everything was from
Mine was $2,000 something, so the something more than paid for the actual cost, and the $2,000 was gross profit. But here's the thing. Okay, we have several thousand counties in all 50 states. The only state that doesn't have counties is Louisiana. They have the same thing. They're called parishes. Now, in just about, I think every state, the prosecuting attorney or district attorney is usually by county, and he's usually elected by the population. Now, there are laws on the books about extortion. And when you've got somebody in a hospital bed and basically, you're controlling their life, and maybe they're quite sick, maybe not, but you extort them by charging them $50, $49, and of course that's the statistical average. If it's 49, some outfits are charging 100 or 75 or something.
Right, it could be 5,000%. 5,000%.
And you've got them in a hospital bed; they can't leave, and you're ripping them off for that. That's extortion. That's
right.
extortion. Or you're telling them it's critical. They're in the ER. They need a CAT scan, and you're not charging them the $20 because the guy when you paid $20, they were making a profit off the $20. But you're charging them over $2,000 for that CAT scan. All a CAT scan is an X-ray machine. He goes around, makes a series of X-rays real quick, loads you up with radiation, but. So my point is, and we're both 64, pushing 65. Now, I can imagine 30, 40 years ago, and you can adjust it down for inflation, but if somebody had tried that kind of crap If a hospital had tried that 30 years ago or 40 years ago, well, people would have refused to pay. If they tried to get a lawyer to force them to pay, people would have just called the prosecutor up and said, why aren't you arresting these people? And you know what? The people would have been arrested, the board of directors and the hospital administrators. Here's my point. Texas, nobody's doing that.
No, well, they're passing laws in Texas, so you can't sue for malpractice. So you can't sue.
But I'm talking civil. I'm not talking civil. I'm talking criminal. Extortion is still extortion. It's a felony. It will send you to prison for years. If you start seeing around the country hospital presidents, CEOs, boards of directors, with all the rich doctors sitting on the boards of directors, being criminally charged with felonies for extorting their patients, extortion.
It's mindless.
Then all of a sudden, the prices in these insane prices in these hospital building projects, $10 million here, $100 million here, all this stuff, the prices would drop like a rock.
That's right.
And what people need to do, rather than just take it, and I've seen people fighting mad in hospitals over their bills, and they're just shrugged off, you know. And if you don't pay, well, they've got lawyers on call, and they'll sue you, they'll drag you into court, and et cetera, garnish your wages, whatever, make you feel terrible, and you're not a crook. They're the crooks. Now, what we need to do, and people need to do, and they need to do it especially in their churches where they're organized, talk to people. I bet you there's not hardly anybody listening to this in America, for sure, who can't tell you multiple horror stories, either themselves or friends and family members, how they've been ripped off in hospitals.
Right.
What you need to do is to call your local prosecuting attorney, district attorney up, and demand extortion felony charges. And then, of course, they won't do it. Then you need to get a bunch of people, families, ministers, preachers, priests, all kind of people, demonstrate in front of the courthouse demanding that the law be enforced, demanding the arrest of so-and-so hospital administrator.
Well, see,
and then if they still don't do it, then go to the neighborhood, find the house where the prosecuting attorney lives and the house where the hospital administrator lives, and hold demonstrations in front of their private residence. Take it home to them, because the majority of people in this country that declare bankruptcy do it because of extreme medical billing, and the majority of those people have health insurance.
Sure, well, they do it, but remember that they pass laws against you protesting those things. They pass laws giving them the rights you used to have against you.
Well, so you can still raise hell. You can make their life very miserable. You have to make the effort.
Oh, yeah. You have to.
And we can do this, folks. Jeff, thank you very much for being on. Chris Harris is our Nutrimedical Report with Tim Alexander and Chris Harris, our nuclear expert. Chris, I posted, and I know you know about this. We've discussed it. I sent you a copy of what I posted on my news blog, Europe. I've got a couple stories, and it's really quite fascinating. I knew about Alchemy laser enrichment of U-238 for probably 30 years, but this is kind of in the same broad ballpark, but yet it's different. Nuclear transmutation technology. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries has a process now. They're away from really doing it big time, but low energy nuclear reactions to clean up nuclear waste. And I think let me read a paragraph or two here.
Yep.
The researchers put the source material they want to convert on top of the multi-layer film, which consists of alternatively laminated thin films of calcium oxide and polyum. The thin metal layers have a thickness of several tens of nanometers. Elements are changed in atomic number in increments of 2, 4, 6, and over 100 hours, while dilithium gas is allowed to pass through the film. The transmutation of selenium into phazodinium. Yep. Okay, I massacred that one. Strontium into molybdenum, calcium into iridium, tungsten into platinum have been confirmed. And in 2013, Mitsubishi had a patent originally issued in Japan. It was continued on with a European patent, and protects its proprietary thin film transmutation technology. That's really something.
And that's amazing, and it's just it's unbelievable technology. It's almost like full circle have gone back to alchemy. Well,
they're calling it alchemy.
They are. They're not kidding. They are exactly calling it alchemy. And I know. I was thinking about that. I really appreciate that you sent that to my attention. And I was thinking about it. And I told my two boys are engineers, and they're actually pursuing higher degrees right now in engineering. I said, listen, guys, material science is wide open. We don't even know half of what we take for granted as a material, a thin film of something excited by something else. We don't know what everything does. And you guys are living in an era right now where you could solve all kinds of problems that you couldn't even fathom of solving before with the same old. Really, they're going to look at what we do with steel as you're in the Stone Axe age, and
exactly. Well, Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think of vibration frequencies and energy. And we know from quantum physics and quantum mechanics that there really is no matter. What ultimately, when you break matter down, you get to vibrating strings of energy, and this is a case of a neutron or something moving from, and so you turn strontium-90, which is a very nasty substance, into
molybdenum.
Yeah, my dad actually used to have some of that. It was off of a piece of old laundry part that he had, and he said, "Well, they called all this in, but I kept this little piece because they're using it for something or other in the government." And of course, that was 40, 50 years ago. But it's amazing that you can take something that's very dangerous, very nasty, and without really hardly doing anything except letting it sit. And it transmutates itself into something that's safe, rare earth elements and various things. The follow-on story to this, which I also have posted right below it on my site, Nuclear Transmutation Technology, What's Next After Making Gold in Microwaves, it's a video. And the first part of the video, they talk about Fukushima and how this can all relate to Fukushima, so I included it. But evidently, as far back as a year ago, it came out that they have a way of, and I don't know if they're starting with lead or what substance they're starting with, but they're using microwave energy to change it, to transmutate it into gold. Of course, the kicker is that probably the energy costs are far greater than what gold you get out of it, but it's still interesting.
And maybe that's where cold fusion comes to the rescue, and you
could be. 30-some years ago, the Israelis, the West Germans, and we Americans came up with a technology which they call laser alchemy, a laser enrichment of U-238, where we were able to use a laser beam and transmutate a non-weapons grade uranium into a higher weapons grade uranium, as opposed to using the very expensive, very large centrifuges that, for instance, Iran is using, or we used as far back as the 30s and the 40s. But this whole field, you're exactly right. It's wide open. I think someday, 100 years from now, people will look and say, "My Lord, weren't we really primitive? Those people back in the early part of the 21st century, they didn't have a clue." That's assuming we live. The world makes it out of just craziness. I continue to read, and of course I probably read more than average 100 people, but I continue to read just about every day reports of now whales washing up dead, large whales, not one or two, but a dozen or 10 or so, and just signs that the Pacific is just really under a deadly assault. What do you think?
Well, I was having a similar conversation with one of my colleagues today. We were talking just about the shark attacks that were happening on the east coast of the U.S. And I said, is there something wrong with the fish they normally feed on? Maybe they're not there and they're just hungry. Yeah, I mean, gruesome as it is,
Yeah.
they're attacking people in knee-deep water, and maybe that's atypical.
Knee-deep?
So,
well, I love the ocean. I love to be around the ocean. But I think if you want to swim, that's why God made swimming pools. And, of course, he didn't make swimming pools, but we did, but it's all his stuff anyway. But I don't go in the water much over a foot deep in the ocean. Now, when I was a kid, I've been out in the Gulf of Mexico swimming or on a float, and I look in, and there's a shark between me and the shore. That's kind of a scary sight. But when you're young, you do a lot of stupid things. I do a lot of stupid things now, and I'm not young.
You and me both. I do all kinds of dumb things. Only by luck.
Yeah, God takes care of fools, and what other drunks and fools, I think is the saying. But it's at least somebody somewhere is working on a broad, long-term solution to part of the nuclear pollution problem. But the time factor in terms of Fukushima, to get something in operation in a big enough, operation and make a difference, I think it's a few years down the road.
It's at least 10 years down, according to the article.
Yeah. Folks, we'll be right back in a couple minutes. Chris Harris and Tim Alexander. Chris Harris and Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, this is over a period of years. Dr. Bill has asked me to stay on top of the Fukushima topic, and it's kind of forced me to stay on top of it and to keep on thinking along the lines of what could be done and maybe the pitfalls of the proper way to handle this and warn people about when things are going awry. And I guess, and this, my colleagues also, we talk about it a lot all the time, and we're involved in a lot of the different areas that are related to Fukushima. So I appreciate that particular. I guess it's a side benefit of reporting on here and being allowed to report on such an important subject on such an important program, and I appreciate that a lot. We talked a while ago about the inadequacy of the bolted tanks that are being used or are being used at Fukushima to store radioactive liquids and sludge. And almost from day one, when we saw they were going to go that route, we threw the yellow flag and said, no, this is totally inadequate. And then over a period of years, after building hundreds of these tank farms, with that material, all the things that we said were going to happen is they're going to get leaks at all the joints. It's not made for this. They did. The level instrumentation was no good because they couldn't get a proper mounting onto the tanks. That's why if you ever go to a power plant, you see it. Everything is welded construction, and it's that way for a reason. It has to meet that particular set of codes because the bolted connections are inadequate for that job. They're all going to leak. The material is just not durable.
Yeah, I remember many years ago I was interviewed for a job, and I didn't have the technical training, but I don't know for what other reason. I was interviewed for this job, and it was a firm that checks welds and stuff in power plants and so forth. And I mean, it's a very, very big deal Every weld, every joint, everything has to be checked, x-rayed, looked at, and looked at again and again, because the substance you're holding is so damn dangerous. And they obviously haven't done that. I guess it was money, and that's inexcusable, because in the long run it costs you more anyway. We've got a real nightmare on our hands in the Pacific. And I think it's fascinating that there's some technology now coming down the road that could help alleviate this. But, 10 years is a very long time when you've got 3 reactors that have gone China syndrome. We don't even know where the bulk of the enriched uranium plutonium is.
No, we don't know. I guess I was just getting back to these tanks for a second, is that they have to replace them. They know that. Now they're dismantling them. Thank you to simplyinfo.org. They took TEPCO's and they translated it so that I could read it. There are some folks from Japan in there, and they helped me with the translation of a lot of the technical information.
What do they do with the old tanks? They've got to be radioactive as all get out.
If you want to post this article, it's very interesting. They're dismantling them now. If you go ahead and take a tank and you open it to atmosphere that was previously containing radioactive material, now what? You could actually make a mistake and get an airborne release. And hundreds of these tanks, I foresee that they're going to have some sort of problem where they're going to have, now they have to be ultra controlled on how they dismantle these tanks, and they know that they're inadequate. They need to replace them with welded tanks. And they are going to very painstakingly, carefully inert them with an absorbent dust, and then take the tanks one section at a time, wrap them up, transport them to a special building that they had constructed where they will be cut up into little pieces. All of this is now solid waste. And so that was something I didn't even think of.
So what do you do? Take that solid waste out and dig a deep hole and bury it for the next few thousand years?
That's exactly the right question. I mean, what do you... By not thinking ahead and using improper materials in construction, you actually exacerbate the problem by creating even more waste than you started with, and now it's another dilemma. So the whole
put it in a simple way: if you are allergic to poison ivy, and you get poison ivy and you start scratching it, unless you decontaminate your hand, anything that hand touches has a certain amount of oil on it, and you spread the poison ivy. Only in this case, it's not poison ivy oil, which can be very nasty. It's radioactive substances with half-lives of hundreds or thousands and thousands of years. All right?
Yeah. This stuff is going to escape into the environment, and then the bottom of all these tanks are covered with the sludge that we talked about. It was from their liquid processing system, and that's the very nasty stuff when you get down to that. So I foresee some problems in that. The interesting about the poison ivy anecdote, but I guess was that the urushiol, that the oil that gets rubbed all over the place.
Yeah. There are different things to do with poison ivy, but the point is that if you're not very careful, you can spread it, and then you end up, with poison ivy all over you. And I mean, this isn't poison ivy. This kills, and vast amounts. I've seen some photos of that place where this stuff is just, there's powder. They're in these big storage containers, and it's right by the ocean. And what happens if they have another tsunami? It washes up on the beach in Long Beach or San Francisco or L.A.
Yeah, well, that's just the problem. I mean, once these tanks are open to atmosphere, then you could either get an airborne release or a liquid release or both. And you're right, if something, a heavy rain, they get a typhoon or something, or even a tsunami, and that's you've created a direct path to the environment. So certainly not happy about this. Anyway, that's a pretty good explanation of what's going on. It's very current. It's June 24th article, and I think you should take a look at that.
Email it to me if you would, please, sir.
I think I already did.
Oh, okay. I haven't checked my email.
Yep.
Okay,
that's fine.
Yeah. I just, this whole Fukushima thing, well, one of the things that amazes me, I was out Tuesday night with a couple of friends, and the one friend, he loves to eat salmon and everything, and I love seafood, but I won't eat stuff out of the Gulf of Mexico because of the core exit and the oil, and I won't eat anything from the Pacific, and unless I'm sure it's from the Atlantic or someplace else that's safe, I won't eat it. And he says, "Oh, that Fukushima, you still worried about that?" And see, he doesn't listen to us. He doesn't go to Dr. Bill's site or my site or Jeff Reed's site. And the mainstream media has largely ignored Fukushima for a very long time now. It's like, there's not a problem. And all these things washing up on the Pacific coast, from the giant whales to the little starfish that are all dying, and really, really weird stuff. Well, it's just, it just happens. It's got nothing to do with Fukushima. Fukushima was one.
We already know that the mainstream media doesn't talk about it much. I got a question for you then, with your area of expertise and all. Will the TPP prevent us from talking about things like this, or
well, it's not going to prevent me from talking about it. They can go to hell, because you can't change the American Constitution by treaty. And my ancestors, literally back at the Revolutionary War, my great-great-great-grandfather and my great-great-great-great-grandfather fought on North Carolina line to free this country. And but yeah, TPP is a nightmare, and the American public better start ringing the phones of their senators and congressmen off the hook, because they're trashing our Constitution, and God help us. Well, Chris, thank you very much, as usual. Your expertise is great. It's great to have a nuclear engineer on board that comes on once a week and shares his expertise, his wisdom, his training, and all. Well, folks, we live in very dangerous times. I say it every day that I'm on the air here. We get right with God. God's the center of everything, and eternity's a long time. You want to end up going upstairs, not downstairs. God bless. Thanks, Chris.
Take care.